Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mobile Fraud Data Security 1.0 Roundtable. Great to see so many of you here. There is a very real problem with mobile fraud and mobile security. They are staggering numbers now. You know, the amount of money that people are transacting on the mobile channel, the way in which they are failing to secure it, the way in which fraudsters are gaining access to that channel and stealing identities, stealing money and defrauding an industry as well. It's a growing problem. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. So the reason why we're here to have this roundtable is to discuss this rising and growing problem and try to see how all of the various areas of the industry can engage and try to make it better. These are some of the questions which I think we'd like to pose. You know, how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect the consumers? How do they protect themselves? How do we legislate? And ultimately, how do we stop fraud?
Last week I was reading a report from First Data on advance payments, one of the interesting stats I read was that 73% of the stakeholders in the mobile payment market actually registered security as one of their key concerns in terms of moving ahead with developing mobile payments products and applications. Gartner predicts that the rise of cybercrime by 10% per annum by 2016, all of that being driven by the new threats being brought by the mobile channel. I thought that sort of gives quite a good setting for the discussions we are having today.
Fraud per se is more an area of criminal law. The question is, to what extent will the results of fraud or the implications of fraud affect the way in which regulation is put through? And so whilst I'm starting off with looking at what fraud is, we'll be looking at what the regulation of mobile payments is, indeed what are mobile payments. We'll be looking at the ECB's recommendations for IT security, which are again put in place in part to deal with the issues of fraud, and then having a brief flick forward to look at what the future is in this space. What is the legislation coming up in Europe that is going to affect the way in which fraud is dealt with?
When it's just purely bank products, you know, we're talking cards and their accounts, that's one thing. But when there's this extension to the mobile phone, we all feel a lot more personal about it for some reason. You know, do you have any insights on what they're doing, or at least what your organisations are doing in this area?
Yeah, I know you're right. I think it seems more personal. Getting the customer to understand is always going to be the difficult problem, and I think the mobile phone, because a lot more of it is with the younger customers who've probably not ever had the card education.
So that's what I think is key to all of this, is customer education.
What we've done has been to provide a much more analytics view, because we think that's what's going to happen.
The real problem we've had is ID theft, when someone is total ID theft. And that's one of the things, you know, we've got a lot of processes, velocity limits in place, but I'd be interested to know how do we secure ourselves against something like that, because that always comes and kicks back to us as being liable.
That's the most prevalent now, where someone actually pays someone to compromise their own identity.
I think it's probably unrealistic to say, yeah, we can stop fraud. I mean, it's because if you know, fraud involves technology changes, so you can definitely apply technology now, probably better to solve the fraud vectors that are enforced at the minute. But what they'll do is they'll shift their behaviour to different types of fraud vectors.
It's big business, you know, it's big business, and it's sophisticated hackers that operate from one country and sort of pass information to the next group. And you know, at Validsoft, you know, we recognise that, you know, it's not about stopping hackers. You can't stop hackers. What you can stop is stopping hackers making actually a profit out of the fraudulent data they've acquired, and that's the business we're in.